26 minutes in front of the hour. You're listening to Morning Air, and we'll have Glenn's Story Corner coming up in just a little while. Right now, Tim and Debbie Bishop are with me, and they've written a book called Two Are Better, Midlife Newlyweds Bicycle Coast to Coast. And that's, that's pretty much their story. They put it right there on the cover. They talk about their marriage and then this bicycle trip they took across the country. And you can find out more at openroadpress.com. That's openroadpress.com. Tim and Debbie, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having us.
So I don't know which one of you wants to jump in first, but let's start with your marriage, because you both got married a bit older than some folks do, and both for the first time.
Yes, that's right. We waited a long time, 52 years, and we've been married 3.5 years now, and it's been wonderful, but it took a long time and lots of prayer before we found the right person.
It's very unusual for two people not to have been married at that point in their lives.
Yes. My family, a lot of them have been divorced, and I remember in my 20s, I was engaged and I wasn't sure, and someone said, well, Deb, you can always get divorced. I said, I'm not going into a marriage thinking I can get divorced. So I really did wait, and I waited definitely for the perfect person for me.
Yeah, of course, we both had a few near misses. You don't live 50 years without having them, I guess. So, but God preserved us for one another, so that was great.
Now, Debbie, had you thought at some point, well, maybe what really God wants for me is singleness?
It's funny because I never really believed that. I've talked to people and they said, well, you will be content if you are supposed to be single. And, I had a great life as a single person, but in the back of my mind, I always believed God would provide a spouse for me. It was really an answer to prayer.
What about you, Tim? Did you ever think, well, okay, I guess a bachelor is where God wants me to be?
I never really lost the desire to have a companion, but I felt perhaps it was important for me to learn contentment in my single state. And it wasn't until that point, and almost a releasing of the desire to God, that he then met the need.
I think you two are such a beautiful witness to what marriage means. To me, that is just beautiful.
Thank
you.
So how did you meet?
We met online, actually, about 6 or 7 years before we ended up getting married. And we had quite a long time, I'd call it email pen pal friendship. And we really got to know one another before we got serious. We emailed for probably 5 years before we even got serious about one another. We'd see one another maybe once or twice a year for an event. I lived in Maine, and Debbie lived down here in Massachusetts. We're about 5 hours apart.
And when did you know that you wanted to be married?
To one another, it took some time. It was really, I would say, for me, it was the 7 years. I had a situation I was struggling with in my work life that really had my attention and had me distracted. During the time we knew one another, Debbie had some other relationships, and I can let her talk.
Don't remind me. We were friends, and so I would talk to him about these guys, and I even got engaged to one guy. It was ridiculous. My parents were kind of in a panic, and I knew I had to get out of that relationship, but Tim sort of was a little cautious after he saw me walk through that.
Yeah.
So that was in 2005 and 2006. But I remember 2007 was when we both turned 50. Actually, today's Tim's birthday, but we met for our 50th birthday in 2007 and celebrated. And I remember he left, that night after our time together and drove back up to Maine. And I remember hugging him and thinking, man, I don't want to, let this hug end. And I think, my heart started getting stirred. It really was around 2007. So that was about 4 years after we met.
And Tim, was that, were you on that timetable too? Did it take you a little longer?
It took me longer.
It sure did.
If you, as people who read our book will begin to understand, Debbie's much more adventuresome than I am. I'm more cautious by nature. So, I was not in a hurry in terms of that.
Okay, well, that may answer my next question then, because, Deb, I was going to ask you if you were the one who came up with the bike trip idea or if it was Tim.
Actually, that was sort of mutual. We had I came up to see Tim one weekend in I can't remember what year, but he showed me his desire to bike across the country, and he had this plan. I think he was going to go with a group, and it fell through. And I had written on my sort of bucket list that I wanted to bike across the country. So when we were up on the top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park in Maine, when he proposed in April of 2010, he said, after we decided, I said yes and all that excitement, he said, I have no plans for work after this, and you've got the summers off. Why don't we bike across the country? So it came together so fast, but we both were so excited about doing it.
So how long was it between the wedding itself and when you embarked on this trip?
We got married on June 19th, and we started bicycling on July 3rd.
And where did you start from?
Seaside, Oregon.
Okay.
My cousin lives in Oregon, and he's a big biker, and he's a naturopath doctor. And so when I found out we were going to bike across the country and we got the adventure cycling maps, then I called Jim and said, can we fly out and bike from, your place? And he goes, no, I'll take you up to Seaside. So from Portland, he drove us with our bikes and all our equipment up to the start of the Lewis and Clark Trail. And so we started in Seaside and ended in Cape Elizabeth, Maine.
Wow. Well, those first few months, certainly that first year of marriage, there's a lot of adjustment and getting to know each other. And usually people do that in the first couple of months with the benefit of plumbing.
Oh, yeah. That probably would have made things a little less embarrassing, I guess.
What was it like as you were, you'd only been married, it sounds like, a week and a half, 2 weeks? And all of a sudden you're camping together for a very long time and on the road every day.
Well, yeah, it was sort of humorous. I laugh now, and actually we probably laughed then too, but there were no bathrooms around. So I'm like, Tim, every 10 miles I had to go to the bathroom. So he kind of held my bike and looked out for cars while I, went to the bathroom, did my business on the side of the road. And, I carried a little Ziploc bag and toilet paper and wet ones. I was very prepared, but it was, it was interesting.
Yeah, I'd say as far as the adjustment part to marriage, it was really a pretty neat way to do things because, we'd waited so long and we really, we were ready at that point and we wanted to dive right in. And this really kind of accelerated that bonding process because it was 24/7 that we were with one another. The only times we could get away was when we were on our bicycles. We could sprint ahead of one another. We needed a little space.
Well, yes, and certainly the dividing line of, you're leaving the old life behind, the two become one. There's a pretty dramatic line there for you that you can look back on.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because we were great on the bicycle trip, and then we got back, and I was teaching school at the time, and we came, I think it was September 1st we got back. So I came to school, that first week, and I remember I drove home, and I parked in the parking lot, or, our parking spot, and Tim was out in the parking lot, and I go, what are you doing here? And he's like, I live here. Funny, because I don't know, on the bike trip we were together, but then I got back into my, life, teaching and coming home and, needing to be alone a lot just to regroup from the day.
Yeah.
And so that was the part that was the hardest adjustment for me, was getting back into my routine. And he was there,
We're still working on that one.
Yeah. Well, having had your rhythms for so long as adults, you really are. You're changing a lifetime of habits at that point.
Yeah. And for me, I was pulled out of an old life in a major way because I'd lived in an apartment, the same apartment, for 25 years. I was in the same job for 26 years.
Wow.
And I left the state of Maine where I'd lived all my life, but for a couple of years in Connecticut when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess actually for me, because of that break, I think the change was easier.
There's a photo of the world's oldest couch and a sad little weightlifting bench next to a dumpster. Were those yours, Tim?
Actually, I borrowed them from two different people.
Because they'd seen better days by the time they got next to the dumpster there.
Yeah, the couch was a running joke between me and my mother, and she was always at me to get rid of the couch. And I had my boss in Connecticut from my first job out of college had given me the couch, and it was pretty tattered when I had it then.
Mm-hmm.
It had coffee cans to prop up the springs. And the weight bench came probably 15 years later from a very good friend, and he thought it was on its last legs at the time, but it worked fine for a few years.
So is it safe to say that you're thrifty, Tim?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've been accused of that before.
I remember in marriage counseling, before premarital counseling, and the pastor said, Tim, you're going to have to lighten up those purse strings, and Debbie, you're going to have to tighten yours. That's been an interesting compromise.
Well, it sounds like you're enjoying the journey.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So how long were you on the road?
We were on the road roughly 2 months. We had 63 days from when we landed in Oregon to when we landed in Maine. And I think about 54 of those days we were bicycling.
Mm-hmm. I've been to Seaside many times. It's not exactly flat there. So, I mean, it sounds like you started out with a fairly challenging ride right at the beginning.
Yes, we were sort of shocked about that because we thought, near the water it would be flat.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, the first couple of weeks were very challenging. And I got saddle sores on top of that. And so that was another thing that we had to get over our embarrassment. Like, can you look at my saddle sores and see how they're doing? And
yeah, because of how fast this all came together, the engagement happened on April 22nd. So we only had basically 10 weeks between the engagement, and it actually took us a week or so to decide whether we were going to do the bicycle ride. We were planning a wedding from scratch and also a bike trip from scratch. We had to go out and find what we needed for equipment and go out and buy it. And we didn't really have time to get in cross-country bicycling shape by any means.
yeah.
So the first 2 weeks really were getting in shape.
Was there a point where either of you said, maybe we need to just go home?
Oh, I thought about that the first, really, 15 days. I fantasized about, where are the airports around here? I could just, fly back, and Tim can finish the ride if he wants to, and I can get some sleep. Because, I finished school I think it was June 17th. We got married on the 19th, and, we really were lacking on sleep.
Yeah, we yanked me out of the apartment in, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
We got back here at, I don't know what, we went to bed at
5 o'clock in the morning.
It was 4:30 in the morning, and we had to get up to get the plane to go west at 8.
Oh, wow.
So we were really dragging, but we were also excited.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a problem. We weren't complaining, believe me.
Mm-hmm. So how was the process of writing the book? I mean, after you had been on the road and then you were adjusting to life together as a married couple, in a real house, how was the process of writing the book for you?
Well, it was interesting how that actually came about because that wasn't necessarily on our docket. I had left a corporate finance career, and writing was one of my interests, but I hadn't decided to write a book, nor had Debbie, about the trip. We did blog across the country, so we had pretty good documentation of what happened. Mm-hmm. But I guess it was late February, early March of the following season in the winter, I developed a blood clot, and I had to basically stay on my back 24/7. It was probably 3 weeks where I was on crutches. So all I had was either a TV set in front of me, a book, or a slideshow on a digital picture frame that I was looking at most of the time of pictures of our trip. So that just was a great opportunity, actually, to sit there and begin putting some thoughts on paper, which is how it started.
Wow. And the book is called Two Are Better, Midlife Newlyweds Bicycle Coast to Coast by Tim and Debbie Bishop. And you can find out more at openroadpress.com. That's openroadpress.com. Hey, it was delightful talking to both of you. Thanks for coming on the show this morning.
Thanks for having us,
so much,
Sean.
Sean. We appreciate it.
All right, take care.